Town Hall to take a deeper dive into the major topics discussed at the March 22nd public hearing. Today's topics will include single-family zoning, understanding the 10-minute neighborhood application, and the process to resolve conflicting policies. I am Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eiselt, and I am hosting this evening's town hall in my role as chair of the Transportation Planning and Environment Committee. These listening sessions are an opportunity to hear directly from residents. But before we get started, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items. During this town hall, our goal is to listen and collect feedback from our community, especially members of the community who have not had a chance to comment so far on the comprehensive plan. We're pulling questions and comments from 4 different sources to ensure that we have a balanced conversation and hear from new voices. The sources include WebEx, the Q&A feature, the WebEx Raise Your Hand feature for those who would like to speak, Facebook comments, and YouTube comments. Any comments or questions that we were unable to get to within the scheduled time frame this evening will be shared via email. When it's time for the listening session to begin, please use the Raise Your Hand feature to be called upon. Staff will keep a list of who is next to speak, and when it's your turn, we will call out your name and you will be unmuted. Feel free to turn your video on when you are speaking. Each person will have 1 minute to speak, and you can also use the Q&A function to type comments as we move throughout the event. Now I'd like to share just a brief overview of tonight's topics. Charlotte is currently the 15th largest city in the US, and it's estimated that we're going to add another 400,000 people to our population by the year 2040. Many of the growth challenges that our community faces today will not go away, but they will intensify if we aren't innovative in finding impactful yet equitable solutions to accommodate new growth while providing quality places for people to live, work, play, and do business in our community. A comprehensive plan is an important, necessary piece for the next stage in Charlotte's growth. The Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan is a citywide long-range plan that will guide development and investments made in our city over the next 2 decades. It's also a plan that helps us move from being transactional in our development to planned, intentional, and interconnected. Key elements of the draft plan document released for the public review in October of 2020 address neighborhoods and connecting people from those neighborhoods to essential goods, services, and economic mobility opportunities within a 10-minute walk, bike, or transit trip. There are bold ideas about the opportunity to diversify our housing by incorporating duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, townhouses, accessory dwelling units, and other small lot housing. A mix of housing options and lot sizes can increase, mix of housing options and lot sizes can increase housing options, help address the deficit of available housing stock in our community, and to increase residential density and help create an even more vibrant community. It was recently reported that we have 16 days of housing inventory. Yet I want to reemphasize that we expect to have 400,000 people move to our region in the next couple decades. So it's important that we solve these problems. Many examples of the housing that we're talking about already exist in our neighborhoods today, but how do we provide them in more places without causing displacement in our vulnerable communities? So this is just not about achieving density, but also equity in development. It's important to state that the 2040 Comp Plan remains committed to preserving and protecting Charlotte's charming neighborhoods and vibrant communities. The challenge we have, as do most growing cities, is finding that balance between our goals for growth, our goals for preserving assets in the community, like our beloved tree canopy, and making sure that we have strong implementation tools to make things happen when development walks in the door. The future of our city is about providing choices. Every goal in this plan is not meant to be applied in every place, but every person in our community should see a part of themselves in the plan goals. So tonight we want to hear from the community about your ideas and experiences to make the plan better by building on the policies within the draft plan. Again, I want to emphasize that we want members of the community who have not had a chance to speak to comment on the plan. At this time, we'll begin the listening session. Remember to use the raise your hand function in order to be called upon. Staff will keep a list of who is next to speak, and when it's your turn, we will call your name and you will be unmuted. Each person will have 1 minute to speak, and feel free to turn on your video when you are speaking so we can see you. Our first comment is coming from Cameron Pruitt, and he has a question. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I just want to again thank Council for all the efforts you've done towards outreach for this. I have my copy here of the 2040 plan. We have read it as a board, the LGBTQ Dems, and are very excited about many of the parts. One thing I wanted to hear more about when we talk about equity is plans towards ending food deserts here in Charlotte. My lease is up in June, so I've been looking at many places to move, and finding good, nutritious food that is fresh is actually more difficult in the city than I thought it would be. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Cameron. I'm going to let Taiwo talk, but I want to mention that part of having a comprehensive vision plan, once it's mapped out, it shows us where those food deserts are, and it really helps us to make those kinds of plans and see it more visibly instead of just knowing neighborhood by neighborhood that something doesn't exist. And I don't know if Taiwo has more to add to that, but even though the plan doesn't specify where there needs to be more grocery stores, it will shine a light on where we have food deserts and where there are opportunities to have incentives or to get developers to come in, or where we need more housing to justify more services.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One of the goals, Mayor Pro Tem is correct. One of the goals specifies, I believe it's goal number 6, the Charlotte to become a healthy, active, safe and active community. And I believe that goal number 1 actually talks about us to create 10-minute neighborhoods. There's got to be accessibility and connectivity with food deserts. So like Mayor Pro Tem said, if you look at the map, the maps in the first 30-some pages that have vulnerable communities, they also seem to be aligned with where we have the food deserts today. So as we define those during the place types mapping, I can at least cite about 6 or so different policies in the comprehensive plan that specifically talk about food deserts and how we're going to address that during the place types mapping. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joseph Margolis. Welcome, Joseph.
Hi, Mayor Pro Tem. I hope you're doing well. I hope all the city staff and other and the colleagues who are attending are doing well. I just want to comment and express my my support for ending single-family zoning. I want to cite, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat for anybody who's interested, a Brooks report from November 27th, 2018 that's talking about the evaluation of assets in Black neighborhoods. Now, I'm going to expand this to my neighborhood. I live in an area where this report states where if it's beyond 50%, I live in Derrida, and it's a predominantly Black area. It's predominantly housed by Black people in our city. I live here too. I have no problem with it. But the problem is in terms of property values, and it has nothing to do with, and the thing that feels bad about it is I feel like that we represent an area that's more about what should be right about this country, because we are living cohesively and around each other in a more diverse area. But according to this report, all of us, whether we're Black, white, whatever background we're from, we're being penalized. There's an average devaluations of homes in majority Black neighborhoods of 13.3%. So Black people only represent 22% of the whole of this metro area, which includes Concord, to be fair. So to me, I think we have to think bigger. And so for all these people that are all of us, because we've been talking about, I know this discussion about ending single family zones has been going on for years, at least since 2017. And so all these people that are coming on, like all of a sudden, like this is happening. It's new to me. And so I see it as two ways, and maybe this is something Taiwo can comment on. So there's neighborhoods like Rockwell in my neighborhood or in my area, which are, it's a predominantly Black neighborhood. It's always been a predominantly Black neighborhood. And so if the families that have been there for generations have problems with density, we've been experiencing the most because we have the most affordable land in the city for like affordable housing to occur. And I'm not against affordable housing, but the problem is it hasn't been equitably spread around the city. And so what I encourage is that you guys, that the city really take the bold step, take the brave step to, even if it angers people in District 6 and District 7, because the people that live in that part of the city represent a demographic that has always gotten the most and the best of everything, all the best land, all the best resources. And so we need to find ways even that go beyond whether the land is affordable to spread out density into those areas.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. We're going to have to move on. We have a lot of speakers tonight, but I appreciate your comments. If you want to put anything else in the chat, feel free to. I know we have over 80 people online tonight, so we do want to try to keep the comments to about a minute or so. Thank you very much for yours, Joseph. Our next speaker is Joe Padilla. Welcome, Joe.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Councilwoman Eiselt. I just want to thank you and your fellow council members for taking the time to consider the additional community input on this critical plan. Our company, Smith Douglas Homes, builds owner-occupied workforce housing throughout the Southeast for teachers, firefighters, nurses, and others who are serving our community. And the challenge is meeting the growing demand as prices are getting greater every day. Our industry is skyrocketing land and material prices, and as well as labor shortages and rising opposition to density. But another very big challenge we frequently deal with are the persistent conflicts that arise from a seemingly endless maze of local regulations, such as the Charlotte Tree Ordinance, the USG, or Urban Street Design Guidelines, and the PCCO. Now, the 2040 plan provides dozens of new policies that will impact land use and development, but unfortunately provides no guidance on how city staff will resolve the conflict that inevitably rise between these competing priorities. So, for example, when CDOT wants a bike lane where a tree save area needs to go, or a planned multi-use trail will impact the site for this plan for affordable housing, who decides which priority comes first? Most of the remaining sites in Charlotte have significant topographical challenges, and a one-size-fits-all regulatory framework makes them even more expensive to develop. So before you adopt this document, I'd like to encourage you to establish a clear internal process for resolving these interdepartmental conflicts, or also to identify someone at the ACM level who's the authority to cut through the regulatory red tape and help get a development project over the finish line. If not, this city will continue to become more expensive to build in. Working families will continue to be priced out. Thank you very much.
Is Alan Baker? I'm sorry, thank you, Joe. Our next speaker is Alan Baker.
Hello.
Alan, if you want to turn your camera on? You don't have to, but.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'll just leave my camera on for now.
Okay.
But all right, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. And I really just have a question about the 2040 plan as it relates to the residents of Far East Charlotte. I live in Far East Charlotte, and I grew up there. And my question is, how will the elimination of single-family zoning in Far East Charlotte affect the lives of the residents there?
Okay, thank you for that question. Ty's going to go ahead and take that.
So just to save time, next week, I believe, is the 21st. Myself, along with our Director of Transportation, Liz Babson, will actually be speaking with the Far East group. I will be on the 21st, I believe, at 6 p.m. So that information is out there. But one of the things that we're going to address will be how the comprehensive plan addresses the issue of density versus trips generation. But perhaps even more important is what happens in the near term without this plan. So we will be able to kind of go into more details. We did that about 3 weeks or so ago with the same group, and we're happy to come back again next week with FENCO. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Taiwo. We have a question on Facebook, and I will read it directly. What are city leaders doing today to address the issue of housing? It seems a lot of development has already been approved to benefit one demographic in this county. So while today they do nothing but approve a bunch of high-priced development and sell land to developers for luxury housing, tomorrow you want to tell the lower income folks you have to settle for apartments, buyer rent, which is also a form of economic segregation and racism because this mostly impacts Black Charlotteans. That might have to be sort of taken apart a little bit, that question, if you could go back. You know, I think development, by the nature of development, means you're going to get a new product on there, and a developer generally, because they, you know, somebody who owns a piece of land is going to sell that piece of land to a developer unless it's city owned. But if what you're talking about is private land sales to a developer, you know, the development in theory is going to be sold or generating income for a higher level than it is now, or it wasn't going to get developed. So I think that itself is a market force. It has already benefited one demographic. So while today they do nothing but approve a bunch of high-priced development, sell land to developers for luxury housing. So, you know, again, the only time that we can really have an impact on the pricing, the ultimate pricing, is when it's a development that is asking for money from our housing trust fund, or we own the land, so that we, the city, has some control over what gets built and at what price point. But again, a private piece of land owned by a private owner can sell that land. Certainly they can come and ask for it to be rezoned, but we can't control really what the rents are going to be and what the sales price are going to be unless we have a stake in that particular piece of land. I don't know, Ty, if you have anything else you want to add to it.
Yeah, the only thing that I will just add to that with regards to inequities, because I think that the question is really addressing what happens between the crescent and the wedge. The first 30-some pages in the comprehensive plan really goes back to our history, not just unique to Charlotte, but the history of redlining and how it's created inequities in cities all over America, and how this comprehensive plan has policies in place, and subsequently the Unified Development Ordinance will be able to have some regulations and ordinances in place that can help to overcome some of these inequities. The entire plan is designed around what we call equitable growth framework and has metrics and measures, including how you measure communities that are vulnerable to involuntary displacement. So I'm not going to go through all of that tonight, but that's, you know, we know the market forces have a role to play, but we also know that there are certain policies that we just have to put in place to allow us to overcome some of those inequities. And hopefully, as we implement this plan, we will get there in terms of what you're saying.
And that's in theory why we are talking about adding the ability to have more duplexes and triplexes, because the cost of the land is the cost of the land. But when you can have a smaller footprint, then, you know, it's a price per square foot. You have the ability for more people to be able to afford that. Our next speaker is Vivian Lord. Welcome, Vivian. You might have to unmute, Vivian, or...
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm also a resident of the Far East part of Mecklenburg County, and rather than a question, I'll address the impact. Right now, in Far East Charlotte, we have less than 7% of our paved roads have sidewalks. We have zero proximity to healthcare, zero proximity public transportation. Our schools are at about 125% capacity. So while I believe in the goals of the plan, you've got to include some analysis when you are considering duplexes and triplexes. That's wonderful where amenities have been allowed, but you don't have any money to do anything for the Far East to make it possible to increase our single family homes to duplexes and triplexes. What, you're talking about a smaller footprint, but if you have 3 houses or 3 cars on single lane roads, please come out to the Far East. We have no shoulders. We have had 52 new housing developments out there, over 100 houses per those developments. I've driven them all. We don't even have turnout lanes, and those developments have been allowed to come out there. And if you then put in duplexes and triplexes, we have no public transit. So we're not the area that this should be allowed. So the plan has got to include still some places where single family only homes are allowed in the neighborhood types. Please, I'm begging you, come out and see how the developers, I have nothing against developers, but the fact that there's been no criteria put in place to clear cut the trees down, not putting in sidewalks, it's dangerous out there. So I'm imploring you, please keep that and be careful where you're putting in and make sure the amenities and infrastructure is there, because you do not have the money to do anything for us in the Far East. We've had folks at our FinCo meetings, and when we ask them, there's no plans for our part of the county. Thank you very much. Appreciate you listening.
Organized neighborhood group that that's asking developers for certain things. It happens in all parts of the city. We just haven't called them community development agreements, but I don't know if most of what's been built out there has been built by right. But oftentimes when a developer wants to build something different or new, they've got to work with the community to get, oftentimes to add sidewalks, to add curb cuts, to add turn lanes. And that's something that we need to look at a little bit more for FinCo, is what the opportunities are for that. Because at the end of the day, it is a chicken and the egg that you're not going to get the sidewalks from somebody building a single family home. You're going to get it more if it's a developer that's building something bigger, or that the population growth calls for it. And that's hard. Growth is hard. Especially when it's a rapid growth in a very short period of time. Getting the services and amenities depend upon having the population growth. So I hear what you're saying. Ty, I don't know if you have anything else to add to it, but.
I really have to compliment our residents who live in the Far East. They've been very vocal and very consistent. I've had exchanges with Ms. Lord as well. It's kind of a very interesting thing, because I've driven there, I've been there. But most of the development is single family density. And, it's hard to, we always say that the justification for infrastructure investment is often density. And if you don't have it, you're likely going to not have a lot of investment in that. Having said that, though, there are certain things that we believe in the short term can be extended towards our residents in the Far East to address some of those things in the near term. And hopefully, when there is a town hall being planned for the first week of May, I believe, where we might be able to address some of those things in specificity. But with regards to the plan, it's really supporting compact development, which justifies investment in mobility opportunities. So I'll leave that there, and then hopefully when we come to you, we can really address some of these things specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ron Kopelman. Ron, are you on?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to hear public comment. Again, There are good elements to the plan that should be retained, but I'm going to focus my comments on the changes that are needed. The 2040 plan really should include draft UDO as well as the proposed mapping of the place types prior to adoption. Without knowing where these place types are planned, how are we supposed to know what development will actually occur? Also, the neighborhood 1 place type sets aside 10% of the land use for non-residential development. I've not been able to ascertain what that means, but when the need for housing in the Charlotte area is so acute, why set aside any of that for non-residential development? Will commercial developments be permitted on this 10% set aside? These are just a few of the questions that the 2040 plan really should answer rather than create. And you talked earlier about, our precious canopy. We've seen how little green space is left on gentrified city lots, and the footprint for new construction will continue to increase the demand for space for things like work from home. The neighborhood 1 place type is going to make a bad situation worse with duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes on lots that already lack sufficient green space. A quadruplex is likely going to put 4 families on the same space that's used in many instances by 1 family today. Other speakers have talked about the conflict that's going to come from the parking that's going to be needed by 4 families versus 1. I want to be clear, we need more housing and diversity of housing, but to do this correctly, the plan should really require progressively larger lot minimums, setbacks, and green space requirements for each progressively higher density. It only makes sense to give people a better living environment as the density increases. Also, the plan works, at least in my judgment, almost like an unfunded mandate and doesn't address the significant underdevelopment that is already existing in roads, public transportation, and most critically, our schools. A dramatic increase in density without a concurrent development in things like our overcrowded schools will only make a bad situation worse. Thank you in advance for hearing our feedback and making these kinds of changes in the 2040 plan.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Apologies. Thank you, Ron. From WebEx, we have a question. Is there still a place to pick up a physical copy of the plan?
We gave out most of the physical copies, but if you would send an email to cltfuture2040@charlottenc.gov, cltfuture2040@charlottenc.gov. We will see if we still have copies, and it will continue to be on a first come, first served basis. So please send an email and we will get back to you. Thank you.
Another question from WebEx. What is the process required to overturn current zoning laws? And do you also plan to overturn deed restrictions? Is this permitted, or must legislation be approved to do so? I'm going to give that to Ty.
As it is written, if council was to go ahead and adopt a comprehensive plan that allows housing diversity in neighborhoods, it will not overturn deed restrictions. It will not. And that's something we're going to make clear in the second draft of the plan. Now, having said that, there are some homeowners associations that do not have deed restrictions on them. They don't have CC&Rs. And a couple of them have reached out that they would like to see diversity in their neighborhoods because they're aging. They would like to stay in place. So, we can't do anything about deed restrictions. It would just have to be, it will not override those conditions that are currently in place.
Thank you. Another question from WebEx. In the proposed plan, will developers still be required to contact neighbors within a certain distance to the property and schedule meetings to gather public input as they do now when rezoning is proposed?
That will not necessarily change. It's not called for in the plan. That will be a unified development function, ordinance function, rather. Right today, that's not going to change. Mayor Pro Tem mentioned earlier the concept of community benefit agreement. The whole notion behind that is that there should be engagement between communities and developers, whether it's through a rezoning process or whatever. But there should always be that collaboration and partnership, and hopefully that will continue into the future.
Thank you. Another question online. Does the plan make single-family zoning illegal, or does it just eliminate R1 single-family zoning? It does not make, the plan does not make building single-family units illegal. It just changes the R1 single-family zoning. Our next speaker is Hermes Goods. Hermes, are you online?
Hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I did participate in early forums as far as place types. I think it was going back as far as 2016. And I've met a few people from the planning department and sharing concerns about tree ordinance and other things. My general concern with the plan is the conversion of what traditionally was open space and basically all planning documents in the past and in other cities. It's no longer open space as in natural tree and green spaces. There is a promotion of paved surfaces through amenities on both private and public spaces. And this is something I brought to the attention in my concerns with the tree canopy and the ordinances. We definitely need to be looking at an overall environmental impact with the full implementation of this plan as far as the environmental effects on water and soil, not just here, but downstream. That's one of my major concerns. The other concern is I am a HOA president in one of the first planned communities in Charlotte. It is a mixture. We're roughly 50% townhomes, multifamily apartments, and single family housing. We have some attached residences. And my concern is we have a planned unit designation. How will this be affected through the changes? And should we be concerned for our single family standalone homes going forward on that? Thank you.
Ty, I don't know if you want to answer that question, but.
No, unless because you're already in an HOA, it probably is not deed restricted, but you do have a planned unit development. So that's a conversation we'll have to have when we get into the mapping of the place types, because I'm sure that your HOA is not the only one that's dealing with that.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Pamela, and I don't have a last name. Go ahead, Pamela, if you're on.
Hi, Julie and everyone. I actually did not mean to raise my hand, and I apologize. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. We have an online question. What would indicate that growth needs to slow or stop? That's a big question. I think most people would tell you that growth needs to slow. We hope it doesn't stop, because that wouldn't be a sign of a healthy city. So I'm guessing that's kind of a rhetorical question, but planned growth is the only way that we can really address rapid growth. We don't want it to stop, but we want it to be predictable and interconnected and planned throughout the city. The next question is about accessory dwelling units. What about accessory dwelling units, say a tiny home or modular in an existing lot? So right now we do allow accessory dwelling units and tiny homes as long as they're not on wheels. I think that's been one of the big struggles in the past, is that some of these new tiny homes are actually mobile, and that's not allowed. I don't think that will be allowed on wheels, but the plan does allow for more ADUs in tiny homes.
And I will quickly add to that while you're going through the plan, you see a number of references to the accessory dwelling units, ADUs. You will not see specific reference to a modular housing and tiny homes. That will change with the second draft of the plan. We're gonna have information in there with regards specifically to tiny homes and modular homes as well. But we do allow all those today. The difference is that once you put a tiny house on wheels, it becomes a building code issue, which is really more of a state-regulated thing. So the comprehensive plan will just carry forward what we're doing today and make it easier for developers or homeowners to be able to have ADUs on their properties, as well as make it possible for us to have people step forward to develop tiny homes in our community, because we believe it's a solution. It's one of these solutions to affordable housing issue and homelessness.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Press Miller.
Thanks, everyone. And just in general, I just wanted to say it's been great, all the information that y'all have put out there. It's made it easy for me to kind of research. I know there's still some lack of understanding across the board, but it's helped me a lot, the outreach that you've done. So I want to thank you for that. But just in general, I want to say that I really am voicing my support for the plan. I like what's on here, and the 10-minute neighborhood I think is just fantastic. Me personally, I think I kind of already live in one. I'm at the kind of nexus of Elizabeth and Plaza, and I live next door to a duplex. There's quadplexes down the way. I'm right behind an apartment. And any of those fears of, all the density has actually made my neighborhood a better place. And just the ability to walk to a grocery store, the hospital is right down the way. I feel like it's not fair for kind of the neighborhood that I'm in not to share that with the rest of Charlotte as well too. So I just want to commend everyone for the work they've done, and to hopefully continue the process of making this a reality in the greenways and all the hard work that you're doing to make this happen. So I just want to thank the people across the board.
Thank you, Press. We appreciate that. We have a comment that came in online that said we should separate the school overcrowding issue from single-family zoning issues. Assuming the population grows as predicted, this will need to be addressed no matter if zoning changes or not. And to that point, that's an interesting point, because we often talk about the problem with school overcrowding and a lot of our rezonings. I don't know that we've ever had a rezoning where the school district said, no problem, we're not overcrowded. But one of the things that the comp plan can do is give the school more predictability about where we see growth going, so that as they do their 10-year plan, they're able to better anticipate and plan for new schools. Facebook question: how exactly are developers consulting with local communities? I haven't heard anything since they've been building in our area. So if it's by right, they don't have to, honestly. I think a good developer is going to reach out to the community. But there are neighborhoods, I will say, that have been very well organized, and the developer knows that they need to work with the community. And I think it's so important. And we need to do everything we can to give neighborhoods tools on how to organize their volunteers, and form land use committees that are informal groups of residents that developers go to and talk to before they plan anything. So some neighborhoods are have that better organized than others, and it just is, it makes a big difference. So I think that's kind of the answer to that. When will a redraft of the plan be available for public review and comment?
So we're targeting mid-May for a release of the second draft, and then it will be available for a 15-day public review. When we probably will go through the same process where if you have it for public review, we also want to make sure that we open up opportunities for our residents to have dialogue with us on what that second draft is like. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. We'll let you know when it's released. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dante Anderson. Welcome, Dante.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
First and foremost, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I think Taiwo and his team has done a great job of answering questions, certainly my questions that I've had over the last couple of months. But I have two questions that seem to keep bubbling up with people that I'm having conversations with. One is, you know, there are peer cities that are sort of comp cities that was used in this plan. And I'm wondering what was the impact of the neighborhood 1 place type in those peer cities that could help either inform or squelch some fears that our Charlottean neighbors are having. I think overall it's a positive impact, but I'd love to hear what Taiwo has to say on that aspect. And then secondly, is there a targeted date for a release of the mapping of the place types?
Thank you, Dante. Good questions. So we looked at, I believe, if I recall, we looked at Austin, Nashville, I believe Minneapolis, Denver. We looked at Montreal. We looked at Raleigh, of course, close by. What's very unique, though, is the path that we're taking is not what all these cities took, with the exception of San Antonio, and we did not necessarily look at San Antonio. And what I meant by that was we had a comprehensive plan that is going to result in place types mapping and then the UDO. And we had a UDO that started before we even got into this process. In the case of Minneapolis, they had their comprehensive plan and just went straight into their unified development ordinance. They were not having conversation around place types. Denver has a conversation around place types, but I don't know to date how that has impacted their unified development ordinance. San Antonio is one that I think is probably more closely aligned with our process than any of the other cities that we looked at, and yet we never really considered them as a peer city when we were doing this. But I do know that the process for them has been very good, very well done. The fortune we have is that the same consultant that actually worked on the San Antonio SA Tomorrow 2040 plan is the same consultant working on ours as well. So there has been a lot of lessons in the change between the two cities. Even though they are much larger than we are, they are more spread out than we are, but there's a lot of good lessons to learn from their approach to place types mapping and subsequently how that feeds into their zoning districts translation. So in terms of date, the way we look at this is if council takes the decision to adopt the plan in June, that triggers that's the wrong word to use, that pretty much puts us in place to start the place types mapping with the community over between July and early January, early 2022, like January. We want to make sure that we avoid engaging people during the holidays. So you know that in that space, you've got summer, obviously, and then you've got Christmas and you've got New Year and you've got Thanksgiving. So we're going to make sure that we space the engagement in such a way that we don't miss people. So it's going to be easily about 6 to 8 months process. And after that, we are going to have a second draft of the UDO available. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty. Just want to mention, thank you, Mayor Lyles, for being on with us tonight and hearing the conversation. The next question came online. It says, Mayor Pro Tem, you are the chair of the Committee with jurisdiction over the environment. Why are so many environmental groups in Charlotte supporting the plan? And what does this plan do to protect the environment and fight climate change? So great question. We haven't had a lot of questions about the environmental impacts on our town hall meetings, but essentially creating 10-minute neighborhoods where people can walk or bike, they may choose to use their car anyway, obviously helps cut down on traffic congestion and getting people out and walking. So 10-minute neighborhoods is one. Being transit focused is another one. This one really marries our transit goals by getting focusing on our transit corridors so that when we invest in our transit system, our public transportation system, we can get more people out of cars and using public transportation. And then I'd say the third area is that our tree canopy. It does focus on preserving our tree canopy as a goal and recognizing when we do the mapping, where we can really emphasize tree canopy and where we might not be able to so much because of infrastructure that might be needed. So do you have any other ideas, Ty, on what?
Yes, I'll build on that. So if you were to divide this entire plan into 4 topics, it will be on housing, mobility, environment, and obviously jobs. That to me those are the 4 areas. And in this plan alone, you've got about 4 or 5 different goals that actually touch on the environment. Goal number 1, which really helps us advance our strategic energy action plan goal to be a carbon neutral city by 2050. But there's a specific goal though that targets the environment, and that is goal number 7, where we talk about integrating the built environment with the natural environment. And in there, we called out something that's unique to our city. It's called Resiliency Innovation Districts, which is RIDs, which really was pulled out of our SEAP, our Strategic Energy Action Plan, as to how can we implement this in every part of our city going forward, knowing fully well that, yes, we're trying to strive for a successful canopy percentage, but we also need to make sure that every building that's built in our city, whether built public buildings or private buildings, there is a conformance somewhere there with regards to how they address resiliency, how they address energy usage, energy efficiency. And so you see all of those things written throughout the plan. And that, I believe, is why a lot of environmental advocates support this plan as you have it today.
Thank you. The next question is from Ali Hosseini. Is Ali on?
Yes. Hi, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for having me on the call. I've been reading your plan, and I'm native of Charlotte, moved to Atlanta for several years, and then actually launched a company, a tech startup in India focused on smart city initiatives, doing a lot of innovative technology, smart connecting infrastructure. As I go through your plan and I search for the term technology, I see the word show up 3 times. And if this is to be a future of Charlotte for 2040, I'd really like to get a little bit more understanding on how technology will play a role into the overall development of Charlotte. I do foresee the technology can really be an advocate for financial constraints that might be there, especially in providing development corrections or fixing issues that we're talking about today, such as sidewalks being missing or constraint areas where there's not enough room for development. The company that I provide, the technology that we do, really can contribute. And we've traveled around the world talking to a lot of smart city initiatives in Dubai and so forth. How do you guys foresee bringing technology into the plan? And do you have any smart city initiatives that will be implemented to help boost some of these goals that you all are trying to strive?
Really good question, Ali. Yeah, so while the word technology may not have shown up a number of times, there are other words that will show up that kind of mirror that, but I do agree with you. We definitely need to focus on that in our next iteration and really see where we're making that integration. But I'll tell you words such as innovation. We have things around how you develop innovative ideas towards creating communities. And then we talked about electric vehicles, electrifying vehicles, and even parking spaces, how we can credit developers if they provide certain number of parking spaces for electric vehicles. in the next iteration, one of the things that you're going to see is encouraging 3D printing of homes, because we know that that's going on right now in some parts of the country, and it's become a fad nationally and globally. And we're also going to be talking about emerging technologies. But good comment you made. We will take a good look at the document and make sure that there are opportunities where we can really bring in the future into the present, since we're talking 20 years from today. Thank you.
Thank you. From Facebook, a question to clarify the question regarding deed restrictions. If the deed restrictions of a subdivision significantly state that only a single family home can be built on a given lot, what takes precedent, the deed restrictions or the 2040 plan? The deed restriction takes precedent. Our next question is also from online. Will setbacks or minimum lot size restrictions be relaxed for ADU units?
Oh, I should remove that. Good question. As a matter of fact, that's one thing that we had in policy 2.1, if I remember, is we said that where you allow ADUs, we will require conformance with residential lot size requirements, setback requirements, and all of those things will be specified in the UDO. Mayor Pro Tem mentioned earlier that we do have opportunities to do ADUs today. The challenge and what we hear from a lot of homeowners is that it's very difficult to do. But I do know that in places like in Steel Creek, there are homeowners who are actually doing them. So we want to be able to generate more of them in the future. So this question, I like to revisit it again when we have the first draft of the Unified Development Ordinance issued. So we see how policy 2.1, where we talked about conformance with lot size requirements and setback requirements, how they address that specifically. But very good question, because we think that's one of those things that can really help us to generate more ADUs in our city.
The next question from online is, can you speak to how communities will be involved in the community area planning and mapping types? And how do we prevent displacement in vulnerable communities? So I'm going to let Ty take the first part of that question, and I'll refer you on the second piece, how do we prevent displacement in vulnerable communities? In the interest of time, I just want to point you to the town hall meeting that we did last Thursday that Councilmember Graham ran, and the whole topic was on displacement in vulnerable communities. And I believe you can still go to Facebook or the city's YouTube channel to listen to that meeting. So with regards to the community's involvement in place types and mapping.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Again, this is Taiwo. So I'll be a little bit in the weeds on this one. If you go into page 158, if you have the comprehensive plan, either you go online or you have the hard copy, beginning from page 158 to 160 or so, we actually laid out how the community area planning process will play out. We also talk about a toolkit that we are going to provide to communities that are looking to, to generate some area plans for their community after this comprehensive plan and the place types mapping is done. For the place type mapping itself, it's going to really be an engagement that's a little different from what we've done in the last 1 year. We know that as cities are gradually opening up because of increase in those who have been vaccinated, we may resort to some hybrid type of meeting where we have online, virtual platform as well as in-person opportunity, because it's going to involve a lot of community engagement and staff would just be playing the role of facilitators. So that's how we're going to do that. Sometime between now and June, we're going to release information about the process for how the place types will go, how we're going to engage community, how we need you to actually help us get the messaging out to your neighborhood associations and your network and your organizations, so that this is more of you driving it rather than us driving the process. So be on the lookout for that as well. But please, if you will go on to page 158 of the plan, it lays out how that process will play out.
Thanks, Ty. We have a comment on Facebook. Thank you for encouraging communication between residents and developers. There needs to be an understanding of the benefits agreements by council members, and there should be language in the comp plan to cover the actual execution of a benefits agreement and how city would be involved in such agreements. So we will make note of that. Thank you for that comment. Another comment online, the problem of wanting everyone, the problem of wanting the problem with everybody using public transportation is it seems like you're making this change to appease the many New Yorkers that have moved here. Natives of Charlotte drive and are not interested in riding your bus or train. How will this affect the economy of the many dealerships we have? So a couple comments on that. I recently sat on a state board of working on transportation solutions, and there is a lot of data to show that dealerships are changing because there are less cars being sold and they're being sold differently. But I think the key is that people are going to still be able to drive if they want to drive. But there's a lot of people who do want other transit solutions because, again, with 400,000 people moving here, and again, that's the populations of Greensboro and Asheville, we've got to find transportation solutions transit solutions that get people to where they want to go fast, efficiently, and affordably. So while I have no doubt there will always be people who want to use their cars, we've also got to come up with solutions to move people. And it may very well be that they're going to move a little faster than people stuck in traffic. So thank you for that question. The next one is, when will the first draft of the UDO be published?
We're looking at the first or the early part of the summer. So if the plan is adopted in June, we're looking at July or early August for the first draft of the Unified Development Ordinance. But if you want to follow along, if you go to our website, the city's website, and go to the planning department's website, you'll be able to follow along and see all of the YouTube recordings of every meeting that we've had with the Ordinance Advisory Council. But that's the plan. Will be the early summer that we're going to release the first draft of the UDO.
Thank you. The next question is there a plan to recover public spaces or small parks that are used by people who use drug and alcohol? Examples, the 9th Street Park near North Graham Street. So great question, but while the comprehensive plan wasn't really meant to address that, that's something that is a great example of how we should be better coordinating with our county colleagues on issues of health and human services, but specifically the comprehensive plan does not address that, that particular issue. The next speaker is Peter Bertorelli. And Peter's online?
Yes, he is. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Thank you. I wish my daughter was still here. I could make sure I get this work properly. Oh, there we go. Oh. Well, I am a resident in Charlotte since '94. You can tell by the accent where I come from, and I certainly don't want to move back to New York City here. I'm a homeowner for 22 years off of 485 in Providence, and the idea that somehow my neighbor could sell his house, have it steamrolled down by a builder and put multi-dwelling homes in here is not okay by me at any level. I know that right now, the people that travel coming off of McKee and also Ballantyne Commons onto Providence Road, stuck at 485 every morning. Now they've turned around and put all this barricades for 2.5 years to fix one traffic area. I know that they put Waverly right above me in less than 6 months. So I haven't seen the roads be addressed at all. And I'm quite concerned about all of a sudden, I bought this house for a reason. I wanted to have some space. I don't want people living on top of me. And I think it's wrong that the city council can do anything like this. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate you sharing your comments tonight. Our next speaker is Daryl Greenberg.
Hello, council members. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Great. Welcome. Ty, this is probably more directed to you. I'm in the process of purchasing land throughout Charlotte-Mecklenburg for future residential development, but I'm at a loss as to what eventually that zoning will be for the land that I'm purchasing for residential. In other words, it might be now by right an R3, but at the end of the day, what am I going to have after I purchase it? And I know that your UDO will probably address that, but do I have any guidelines now to work from? These are not going to be 10-minute neighborhoods because they're more in the outlying areas, and the density is not there this time to have shopping or even at this point workforce opportunities.
So thank you, Daryl. Without specifics or having a map or anything in front of me, it would be very hard for me to answer your specific question. But this plan is not necessarily going to prevent you from doing what you want to do with your property. And so it's your property. It still has to follow the process of the only thing that may change with the plan or the UDO is whether you need to do it, whether you are going to do it by right or it's going to have to go through a rezoning process. But if you're building residential and you want to do many units to be able to meet needs for housing affordability, definitely that's something that we believe that this plan is championing. While you may not necessarily have 10-minute walkability because of infrastructure that's there right now, you can actually create that compact development within that same development, depending on how much land you have, where neighbors can still be able to access sidewalks on their own streets in that same development, rather than just have streets without sidewalks there. So even if they may not be able to do it outside the development, they can at least do it with ease and safety inside their development. But I'd like to be able to sit down with you, hopefully, while the plan is going on. If you can just send an email, taiwo@charlottenc.gov, and we'll be able to sit down with you and really look at the specifics that you have and give you some thoughts as to what you're looking at in terms of purchasing the property. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Damon Hemmerdinger. Damon, you there?
Yes, I think I'm here. Hi. I wanted to express two wishes tonight. First, I wish that everyone had the opportunity to live in a 10-minute neighborhood. I'm fortunate to live in one in New York. My neighborhood includes single-family homes and a multitude of other housing types all mixed together. I can walk to restaurants, grocery stores, subways, and regional trains. And I want to just express my wish that everyone had the opportunity to live in a place like that. The kicker is that my neighborhood was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. just before he designed Myers Park. Second, I wish that the city makes the right choices about the 2040 comprehensive plan, the transit plan, and the other major issues that confront the council. This is the moment where Charlotte will stake out a bold vision for its future that will keep the city on a path to continue growing into a world-class city, or it will take the easy way out. I want to address one of the controversial issues in the plan. As I said, I live in a neighborhood that includes a variety of housing types. 85% of Charlotte's land area is limited to single-family homes. That's not how the great cities of the world have developed, but is instead a legacy of racist desires to keep Black Americans segregated from white Americans. And the consequences of that policy is that housing development is not keeping up with population growth in Charlotte. And what growth there is often forced to the outskirts of the city. I will post a link into the Q&A that does a great job of explaining why more housing is better for everyone. Finally, I just want to say that I agree with the other commenters tonight who've pointed out that there are issues in the plan that need to be developed further, but the fact that there's more work to do should not be an excuse to not take the tremendous step forward by approving this plan now, and then the work will need to continue until all those issues are fully explored. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Damon. And I do want to point out that on Monday, we will have our Transportation Planning and Environmental Committee meeting at 10:30. You can watch it on Facebook or on the city's YouTube channel. And we will be, as a committee, we'll be discussing these very same issues that were the topics for the meeting tonight. So if you're not interested in speaking tonight, but you want to still share your comments, please do put them in the chat, email us, and we look at all of those and we take all of that into consideration as we go about with any revisions that will occur in this plan for presentation in May. Online, we have Amber Mikhail Lutz, who says, I know part of the plan is to build a better, stronger Charlotte for all. In reading the Explore the Immigrant Market report from the National Association of Realtors, it is projected that Asian and Latinx populations will be the majority in Charlotte by 2035. Are these changes in demographics being taken into consideration with the 2040 plan? And are these forms being offered to non-English speaking residents as well? Great question. I do not believe that they are being offered in, the forms are not being offered to non-English speaking residents, probably because none of us are fluent enough in another language to actually conduct, and council members at least, to actually conduct those. But if there is a group out there, either from the Asian community, the Latinx community, who would like to have a meeting and talk about it, we certainly would be willing. I'm happy to help organize it and see what we can do about getting a translator, because that's an important question. With regards to the plan itself, the plan is sort of agnostic in that sense, but the goal is to create neighborhoods. And we had a speaker on one of our town halls that spoke to feeling comfortable and the notion of kinship in a neighborhood. A lot of that happens when people are able to be in neighborhoods with sidewalks, with where they can meet their neighbors, where they feel comfortable. And so a lot of that will come into the process with the community mapping, where neighborhoods get together and they are part of planning and mapping what's important to them in their community.
So maybe I can add to that.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. As a matter of fact, I know that I will be presenting to the National Association of Hispanic Realtors in the next several days, and I'm meeting with your executive director tomorrow to work out how we're going to do that. It's going to also include LIGA, CLT, which is the legislative arm of NAREP. So we're going to be making that presentation, and there will be translation that will be available. But I will also mention that the engagement that's brought us this far included translations. When we've had meetings, whether at Camino Center, we've had translation for our non-English speakers. Finally, I will say that that's something that's very important to us. So if you go to the virtual open house on cltfuture2040.com, you will see in the virtual open house, it actually translates the presentations into multiple languages, including the Spanish language as well. So while this town hall is not, we have done that. I will continue to do that, but we will keep that in mind also during our community place types mapping, that there is translation for our non-English speakers when we go through that process. Thank you.
The next question is, what is the plan to reduce speed on roads where there is a high population density and the sidewalks are very narrow and dangerous? For example, North Graham Street. So there's a couple ways to answer that. One is that we do that now through, not enough, but we do it now through our Vision Zero work, which is part of the Charlotte Department of Transportation. When I say not enough, it's just because, you know, it is a matter of dollars but we've done a lot of work on Parkwood, for instance, that has created sort of a road diet. There has to be a balance between the need to move traffic and the need to slow traffic down. There are streets in our city that are state-owned, so we are restricted on the speed limit, changing speed limits. But streets that are neighborhood streets come off of the thoroughfares, neighborhoods can apply to, I think we can still do that, apply to reduce the speed limit in those streets. So if you have any questions about whether or not your street can, you can reduce the speed limit, feel free to reach out and email me. And I'll get an answer for you. So julie.eiselt@charlottenc.gov. Our next speaker is Wayne Johnson.
Yes, I wanted to really just thank you, everybody, and I really thank the mayor council now. And Ty, I heard you say how you're going to keep coming back to the community input. I like how you're doing it the Charlotte way, and so I'm basically just gonna. I wasn't gonna say anything, but after I heard you say you kept coming back, I will come back to the community once you do this part. We'll kind of iron it out and come back. That's the Charlotte way, so I appreciate that, and I look forward to attending more meetings.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate your comments. Our next speaker is Jennifer Wass. Is Jennifer on?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Great. First of all, thank you for taking my question. It's really more of a comment. I just want to add my voice to the supporters of this plan. I think it's really forward-thinking. It's realistic. We will have the 400,000 people moving here, whether we are ready for them or not. And I do appreciate all the thought that's gone into this plan. My only concern, and it's not a concern for the plan, but so much as the messaging, a lot of people that I talk to are very much concerned that the single-family zoning means that they will not be allowed to build single-family homes, or that their next-door neighbor can build an apartment complex down the corner. And this is obviously not true from what we've heard tonight and from what we can read in the plan. And I just, I try to get the message out as much as I can, and I encourage everybody else here to do that as well. That's probably the biggest sticking point I hear. And I also encourage everybody to look at what other types of housing looks like in Charlotte. A couple of people have brought up Myers Park or Dilworth or Plaza Midwood or Elizabeth. These are places here in our city that already allow for this kind of housing, for this kind of diversity of housing types. We don't have to imagine what it'll look like or worry about it or think that we're going to turn to New York or any place else. Will look like what Charlotte already looks like, where we can do that. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you for sharing that message and encouraging people to get that out, that we are not eliminating people's ability to build single-family housing, and that, really when I live in Dilworth, and I constantly, when I go for a walk, notice a house that all of a sudden I notice 2 addresses on it. I didn't even know it was a duplex. So that product is out there, and if people look a little more closely sometimes, you'll see that there's some really great product out there. Our next speaker is Kathy Davis.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you so much for holding this forum, and I appreciate everyone's time. Last month, I was listening to a planning commission meeting that was taking place, and in that planning commission meeting, one of the commissioners brought up, he said, well, let's look at where we have basically kind of already eliminated exclusive single family zoning and how that has worked out, and did the upzoning to R8, which would be the equivalent of what's being proposed in the plan with the elimination of single family zoning. And how did that work for us? And it was interesting, the observations he had, and he brought up Optimus Park as an example of where they did do this upzoning, and they did it hoping that it would lend itself to still provide affordability for people and to slow the rate of gentrification. But in fact, what happened was the rate of gentrification picked up, the affordability factor became less, and the erosion of single family zoning. So when we look at places where we've tried this here in the city, it has not met the goals of what they thought it would. And this commissioner even said he thought that they owed it to the community, to the public, to do a risk return analysis of implementing such a change. Of course, that has not happened. Further, when I look at the fiscal impact analysis that was done.
I think we lost your audio, Kathy.
Okay, well, that's fine. Can you still hear me?
Oh, no, now we can hear you. Now we got you.
Oh, okay. All right.
And now you're frozen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. When I look at the fiscal impact analysis, On page 164 of the plan, which I have the full document here, it actually indicates that the implementation of this plan has a positive impact, fiscal impact. But that's only half the picture. That is just talking to the city's fiscal impact. It does not take into account the fiscal impact to the county, which actually has a huge negative fiscal impact to the county. And when you net the two, it's basically a wash. So you've got to look at both ends, because this, even though this is a city plan, it's going to require the resources and time and commitment of county resources and money as well. The fiscal impact analysis also made it quite clear that our parks and recs and our school systems that were already struggling in regards to the funding for those areas. Just this week was discussing it. We're 95 out of 97. We only have 6% of our city county land. The national average is 50% is what's supposed to be used. We're falling behind there. Our closer in-city parks are in poor condition. We don't have the funding to address that. We don't have the funding to acquire more lands. CMS, I heard someone earlier say that they thought that that should be taking out of the equation because regardless, people are coming, so they're going to come in. I understand that, but when you're looking at infill areas, the areas that are, the neighborhoods that are already developed and already have density, and those schools are already landlocked, and they have nowhere to go, and they don't have, CMS doesn't have the resources to enhance those schools. That's a huge detriment there as well. So you really can't remove it. Yes, they're coming, but when you allow the elimination of exclusive single family zoning and encourage more density in those neighborhoods, you're putting more children in schools that are landlocked and don't have the ability to enhance those facilities. So you can't remove that. You've got to consider that as well. Also, I heard earlier you made a comment in regards to, sales price is a market force. I totally understand that. But when you are going ahead and allowing upzoning of lots, you are in essence increasing the value of those lots, and therefore you are driving the market force and you are driving the prices up. And in that regard, I fear you're making the opportunity for people to be able to afford single family homes.
We lost your audio again, Kathy, but I think we understand what you're trying to say. Kathy, your audio is off, but I appreciate your comments, and I do understand what you're trying to say. And that's been really what council has been struggling and really wrestling with, is that just supply and demand would indicate that if you have more units, that the price is going to stabilize. But by the same token, there are, a lot of council members that are concerned about displacement. So that's a conversation that is ongoing and active. But I appreciate your comments. And again, those are active conversations that are going on amongst council right now. Lastly, I would just say that I think it's really important when we talk about schools and parks, our school board and our county counterparts, that's why we need a plan, because when we go into these zoning meetings once a month, we go through 5 to 7 hours of transactional rezonings where we're looking at one project and we don't get the benefit of an overall plan to see what the impact of that one project's going to be on the entire community. That's actually why I feel so strongly that we need to get this comprehensive plan. We need it now because the growth is happening fast and furious. Prices are going up no matter what we do. And by having a plan, I know there's things that we need to work out with it, but that's going to help us look at the overall growth in the city and help our colleagues on the other boards decide where the schools are going to go and where the parks need to be enhanced or improved upon if we're talking about equity. So thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Sylvia Biddle-Patton. Welcome back, Sylvia. Are you there?
Thank you so much. Good evening, you all. Thank you for this opportunity. Some of the comments that we kind of gathered through Housing Justice Coalition and the Community Benefits Coalition really center around the 3 topical areas: for tonight. One being about single family zoning. And we know there's a lot of misinformation out there about single family zoning. But I guess the general question is, how will this look differently? Currently with established neighborhoods, we have single family zoning. So that, and it already exists. It permits the duplexes, the triplexes and the quads. How will that change? And in the context of equity, how will the goal be achieved in all areas except for those areas where deed restrictions or historic overlays don't permit this? So that's one question. So it pertains to the single family zoning. The other is the 10-minute walkable neighborhoods. How will this be achieved equally and equitably across all communities? Now, some communities have benefited from the allocation of assets and amenities over decades more so than others. How will the plan UDO address the existing inequities? And then as a part of that, there's a question about how do we ensure that current plans under consideration by council and planning don't undermine the pending efforts? Like, we know that the comp plan is coming down the pike, but there are a number of pending rezoning cases that may very well undermine some of the pending efforts. So is there a way to not necessarily quell any of that, but is there a way to address some of that? And then finally, regarding amendments, how long will the process take to amend the plan if a conflict has been identified, and who will be responsible for identifying the conflicting policies? Will it be residents? Will it be staff? Will it be others, or a combination of all three? And that's a question we had about the amendments or addendums to the actual plan itself if conflicts do arise. And I think the final thing is, you all talked a little bit about CBAs, and we're really glad. We feel that community benefits agreements are very important. We do feel that there is a kind of missing narrative out there that's misinforming individuals that it's illegal in the state. And we firmly believe that CBAs are not illegal in the state, but that just like you all talked about, communities are engaging with CBAs all the time with developers. But we're just asking you to put some teeth into it. Developers have benefits agreements with the city. We want communities to also have benefits agreements. And we do know that's going to come up a little bit later on in the next session. So we want to be a part of that as well. But those are pretty much some of the questions that we have. And thank you again for your time.
Thanks, Sylvia. That was a lot. Let me see if I can address some of them. The single family zoning, the way it's proposed now is that any lot could allow for a duplex, triplex, quadplex if you're going to include one affordable unit. Right now in our city, we allow them on every corner. That's the part that we're talking about right now. And there has been some discussion amongst council members if we say every place type should allow duplex, triplexes. And so I don't know exactly, to be honest, where we're going to land on that. We continue to have that conversation, but we know we've got to get more housing types in our city overall. And that goes to the equity issue that you brought up. I think this is just my layman's point of view, and then I'll have Ty give his professional point of view. But I personally feel like we can't do a great job of equity now because we don't know what our city looks like and what we expect in the future. Again, it goes back to the transactional nature of our rezonings, that when we rezone one parcel of land, it might end up being inequitable because we don't know what the impact is and what amenities are in the area, and we don't have those questions. It's not part of our rezoning process. This would give us, once everything gets mapped, we would know, we would be able to see to someone's point earlier, Cameron's point earlier, where are the food deserts? Where are the parks? Where are the schools? Where are the grocery stores? We don't have the tools to know that right now, but by going through a comprehensive vision plan that then maps these areas out, it gives all of us a much better idea of where do we need to put the infrastructure to attract those kinds of amenities that everybody deserves to have in every part of town. And that is just probably the most important thing that we could achieve by passing this plan, I think, whether it's housing or amenities and services. Amendments, that's a technical question. I'll have Ty answer that.
So right now, if this plan is adopted, it will be reviewed and updated every 5 years, at least within the first 5 years. That's the plan, that we will do this. There are changes or things that will happen between now and then. Yes, certainly. And that's when you want to have some addendum. There will be hopefully not too many of them so they don't complicate the plan. But we know a plan is not set in concrete. We say it's a living document. So it's got to be able to reflect what's going on in the community. So we will be doing that. But I will let you know now that we are actually connecting a lot of dots. There are some developments that are coming in front of council right now through the rezoning process that are already citing this comprehensive plan as a justification for why the development is good. And when we look at it, yeah, there's just some truth to that. But we want to be very careful that we don't, go right ahead and start doing something prior to the plan's adoption. So we are working with our rezoning staff. We're working with our staff in Department of Transportation. We're working with our staff in the Charlotte Area Transit System. We're also working with Park and Rec as well as CMS, just to make sure that we're connecting all the dots where everyone is concerned so that upon the adoption of this plan, it doesn't become outdated right away. And so we are making sure that we're doing that so we can minimize the number of amendments that's done within the first 5 years. If I can say that, but there are processes in place today where we can resolve some of the conflicts, but we will look at those processes and if they can be made better so that if there are some conflicts that are happening, we can jump on that. But the Unified Development Ordinance will speak more to how to conflict resolution between some of those issues.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. It's just about 7 o'clock. I want to thank everybody for being on tonight. If you have any additional comments, please do share them by email. And the next opportunity to engage will be next Thursday, April 22nd at 5:30 p.m. The third town hall will be led by Councilmember Tariq Bakari, and the topics will focus on fiscal impacts of the 2040 comp plan, single-family zoning, and community benefit agreements, which is an economic development area. Be sure to register for the interactive experience in the same website that you used before. And I want to again thank everybody for taking the time, not only to join us this evening, but for really getting informed, learning more about the plan, and please for sharing the information that you hear with your neighbors. Thanks and have a great night.